this for some time. This is an honorary opening exhibit for the James A. Hard exhibit. He was the longest lived Union combat veteran of the Union Army for the Civil War. James Hard, I don't want to go through the entire program, but I'm going to give a synopsis of kind of where he came from and who he was and what he accomplished. He was born, believe it or not, in Victor, New York, not too far from here. About we don't know if it was 1841 or 1843, there's still discussion on that. But when he was about 4 years old, he moved to Windsor, New York, down near Binghamton, and that's where he grew up. And following that, he had to get a job at the age of about 16, and he was working in a sawmill in Dryden, New York. And at that time, they heard a bunch of men coming along in a wagon making a lot of noise, and they all went out from the sawmill to see what was going on, and somebody said, "We just signed up for the Civil War. President Lincoln has called for volunteers." And so they all talked about that, and Hard decided he wanted to join up, and that's where he joined up. The disparity in the ages, I think he was 17 at the time, and a few months from being 18, and the Army was pretty strict about, you had to be 18 at that time. And so he moved his age back a little bit, so he was, I'm 18 now, and so it went. There's another story about that where a young man who was very ethical had the same problem, but instead of moving his date, he put 2 pieces of paper in his boots that said 18 on each one, and then he went in and said, "I'm over 18. So that was good. So anyway, on with Mr. Hard's life, he fought in many battles, which you can read in the program. There are programs on the table, and there's one for everybody to take with them. And if we run out, our digitizer, Frank Hubble, is here, and he can print more. So feel free to take one of those, and if you have a friend that wants one, you can take 2. So Mr. Hard was in the war. He was in a lot of battles. He saw combat. He never got hurt. The closest thing he came to, a captain was standing by him and got a bullet in the head and died right in front of him. And another thing I read about was he was in a battle where they said, "Keep your head low to the ground." And he said, "I almost buried my head in the ground." But he looked over the side and somebody had lifted their head up and it got shot off with a cannon. So he saw a lot. He felt a lot. Luckily, he didn't get hurt. He mustered out in 1863. But before I go further, I got to go back a little bit. When he first got to Washington, he went to an open house at the White House. Guess who he met? President Lincoln and Mrs. Lincoln. He went through the line. The uniforms hadn't come in. And he was shaking hands with Mr. Lincoln, and President Lincoln, he said his hand was as big as a hand. It took mine right out of sight. Those were his very words. And then Lincoln said, "Young man, you look like," this is probably about how he looked at the time. You can see that picture. He said, you look like you'd make a good soldier." He said, "Well, I've already signed up." And Lincoln was talking to the next guy and never paid much attention. But anyway, he did meet the man, and I was very proud of that. So moving forward, he mustered out in 1863. He went out west, worked on the railroads, looking to seek his fortune, and then finally he got married. He married a lady by the name of Loduska Davis, who was originally from Buffalo, but at this point they're all in Nebraska. But eventually they returned to Rochester, and they had a child, Alberta, and they married, and then unfortunately Loduska passed away about 1880. A few years later he married a lady named Annie West. They had a nice marriage through the years, and Hard, what did he do for a living? He decided he wanted to be a lawyer, so he studied law. Can everybody hear me okay in the back?
Yep.
Okay. Don't have a mic on today. So he did study law. I don't know if he became a certified or passed the bar or anything, but he became a pension attorney. This was probably his greatest contribution in life because he got pensions for Civil War veterans and their widows. He got 5,000 pensions to his record for these people, so that was quite an accomplishment. This is all in the days before Social Security. So these pensions were really important to these old timers that had survived. He was working in the Reynolds Arcade down in Rochester. That's a very historic building. And his wife Annie became ill, and he had to retire, and he was 86 when he retired. And he went home to take care of her. And then she passed, and later on he became active in the GAR. And there are pictures up here of the GAR, 1892, with all the folks in Rochester in there. He's up at the top. And then that's in the 20s. In the 30s, the ranks were thinning out. And by the 40s, there were only 16 of them left. That 16 of them meaning Civil War vets in the Monroe County area. And they all became bonded, going to different events together and so forth. So, as the years moved on, Mr. Hard, he was a Grand Commander at one point, but he loved to ride in the parades. And so he was in Memorial Day parades, 4th of July parades. Whenever there was a parade, he was the guy that they called on to come out and be the Grand Marshal. At one point, somebody wanted to put a Spanish-American war veteran up for Grand Marshal, and he said, no, I'm going to hang on to this job as long as I can, and he did. So I got to see him back in 1950, maybe 49, I don't want to give my age away yet, but I was there, and I was on the corner of Main Street and Lake Avenue, and the Memorial Day parade was going by, and I didn't really know who anybody was at that point, but some older gentleman put his hand on my shoulder and said, young man, take a good look at that car, you know who's in there? And I said, no. He says, James Hard, he's the last Civil War veteran. Well, I had a grandfather who was in the Civil War, great-grandfather, and he'd been gone since 1922, and so I said, there goes a live one, oh my gosh. And so after I would read the Democrat occasionally, and Mr. Hard was in there about every other week for some occasion that he was doing. And a lot of these clippings are up on the desk here, and this is like 5% of what exists. They're scrapbooks with so much information on James Hard that it could be a book eventually. So I think we're pretty well through this. I want to come to the part where I had forgotten about James Hard. In my career, I'd gone to college, I was living in other cities and states at the time. I was in the hotel business. But I came home around 1980. Somehow a clipping surfaced that brought it all back to my attention. And then, around 2010, an article came out by Jim Memmott in the Rochester Democrat with Paul Exton here holding James Hard Springfield rifle. I said, oh my gosh, I remember that guy. And I worked up enough nerve and called Paul up, and I said, and we talked and introduced myself and so forth. He was very congenial, and he said, yeah, I've got all Grandpa Hard stuff here. I'm not sure what to do with it. I said, listen, I'm the village historian. Why don't you come up and and that's the history of the whole thing. Paul will talk more about that later. But it was a great experience, and so I've had the pleasure of doing programs on James Hard to try to keep his story alive, because in Rochester, I think Larry, who's here today, is the only one besides myself that remembered him. Now we have the possibility of a lady who Pittsburgh calls Rosie the Riveter, and she's 101. She worked during the Second World War, but she's out doing honor flight today. But Vicki and I have reached out to that family, and hopefully they'll come here. And she's the one that said, I not only remember him, I knew him. So we'll all learn a lot more today if that happens. I think we're getting up to the point where I want to introduce Ken. Ken Freeman.
Behind
Ken's our curator, and he's right here, and he's the one that's put this exhibit together. And so Ken, please say a few words.
Well, the timeline is a little fuzzy for me for when Dave started talking about this, but he came to me one day and said, Paul and the family want to bring the collection to the Historical Society. So I started working up a proposal for how we would display the whole thing, and what was it, like October or somewhere in there, Paul showed up and we showed him the proposal with the display case for the gun and all of that. And he was good with it. John Foster went through all the loan agreement and the like. Over the winter, I started playing what I call Tetris with large objects and rearranged the Civil War display so that we could have Mr. Hard's collection all as the focus of what we have for our Civil War collection. So it all came together with the help of a friend who helped hang the case and all that, and everybody else who gave criticism, and helpful criticism, hopefully, on how to display this stuff. And that's pretty much it.
Yeah. Well, it's the centerpiece of our Civil War exhibit. And Ken has an ancestor, great-great-uncle, who did a diary on the Civil War. He was down there as a private in Washington, probably the same time Hard was. And he wrote letters back home, which got saved. And his mother had them. And then a previous historian here transcribed them. Maybe that's not quite right, but he put it into a book.
Yeah.
So the book is in there, and I've read it twice, 2 or 3 times, and it takes you right back to, if you want to get the feel of what it was like being in Washington. One clip was, one private said, life as a soldier is like 99% boredom, but 1% terror. And that was kind of how it was. They had a lot of time to kill in between drilling and doing things. So, any other comments, Ken?
Well, the only other thing was my great-great-uncle Arthur. I actually had 3 great-uncles who served in the Civil War. One of them died of disease in Memphis, Tennessee, and the other 2 came back here.
Interesting.
I don't know where Uncle John ever ended up, but
Maybe it'll turn up someday.
I just got to read the family history again.
Well, we're lucky to have a board of about 14 people here in our Historical Society in Parma and Hilton. And we all get along, we all work together, and we make a lot of things happen. And it's people like Ken, John Foster, Frank Hubble, Nancy Laporte, Amanda Dudley. Any other board members? Dave Almeida, where are you?
Right next to you, yeah, next to you.
Right behind you. So these are the people that make it happen, and yet it's so nice to have the Hard family here today too, to be a part of this whole event. So next, Paul Exton, would you come up and just say a few words?
Well, basically, he's covered so much, but it's tickling my memories of how we met. And I guess all this started when, let's see, mid-90s. I think my dad had just passed away, and I had the stuff. I remember finally finding out that there's all these articles that were done on Grandpa Hard in the Democrat and Chronicle, so I called Gannett, and I ended up talking to a reporter. I got to ask you a question. Was it the last name Doherty was the original?
Maybe it was Doherty. I was thinking
There's
Jim
an
Emmett, but
there's an OT in there too, an OTT. I think he's the one that came out of the house and did the article you saw.
okay.
But it came down to it, once I got a bug in their ear, I got called back. But this is when I found out there was a big story that went around at Gannett, which is Democrat Chronicle. If it was Doherty that did the original interviews with Grandpa Hard, everybody would tell everybody to go shake that man's hand. Because if you shake Doherty's hand, you're shaking the hand of the man who shook the hand of the man that shook Abraham Lincoln's hand. And, that was just a fun little limerick, so to speak, but it really happened. But yeah, and then they wanted to come out and talk to me, and before I know it, I'm out in the backyard holding a rifle. They take a picture, and this thing comes out in the Democrat Chronicle. Larry and everybody, just a slow motion assembly of all this stuff that we were wondering about, because Dad died, he didn't really tell me much about it.
Right.
And I remember just mentioning it to you guys, but there's this guy right here that taught us more about our family heritage. He can look through our photo albums, he can identify my relatives, and it's just wonderful. It's just been a great ride to get to this point, and I just really appreciate how this is coming together like this. And this is where I always kind of wondered where all this stuff could go, and put it in the public eye, and everybody can enjoy it, so, and thanks.
Thank you very much, Paul. Thanks. And Larry, would you mind telling your memory of meeting your great-great-grandfather Howard?
Well, you rode on his lap in the parade, didn't you?
Well, I didn't ride on his lap in the parade. My dad would go with him.
Okay.
And towards the end, they'd come by the viewing station, and Grandpa Howard would say, "Let me know when we're going by the viewing station so I can salute, because I'm blind, I can't see anybody." But I think I was about 5 when he passed away, so my dad, before that, would take me to his house, and I'd sit on his lap, if I could find him underneath some cigar smoke. And I remember vividly the funeral at Mount Hope also.
That's on the back page here. This is the funeral cortege.
Yeah.
There are thousands of people
Yeah,
there. Did they take you in to see the?
I don't remember.
Yeah.
But I remember, once they got to the cemetery, they put the casket in an open horse-drawn
Okay.
carriage with his boots in the stirrups backwards, signifying a fallen soldier.
Yeah.
For some reason I don't remember a lot, but I remember that.
Very good. Well, thanks, Larry.
Yeah.
And I see a Jim Exton sitting over here. And what are you, about 7th generation down the line?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And your name James is probably after Mr. Hart, isn't it?
That's what I've always been
Somewhere down
told.
the line?
Yeah, my dad, my grandfather, my great-grandfather.
Right.
Yeah, all the way up, yeah.
Interesting. Well, I think we pretty well covered most everything here. I'm sure we've forgotten a few things, but we don't want to get too involved. We have punch here, thanks to Cheryl Almeter and Mari. There's a cake over here honoring James Hard. And I'm going to have Paul cut the ribbon here to go into the museum. I'd like Larry and Paul and Mark and any of the Hard relatives to be the first to go in. And then you can, once you look at the exhibit, there's other exhibits to look at and other people can float in. There's no rush because we're going to be here. Ken and I are the docents today. We'll be here till 4 o'clock, so enjoy it. And we got scissors here, so don't forget those. Come on up, Larry.
Come on, Larry.
What?
Good.
Come on, Mark.
The three of us at least.
Oh, they're on the other side of it. Yeah.
I'll pull this roof. Yeah. Just make it. Ready?